just an example, say your spouse is always late, and every time they're late, you respond with this negative comment. You're always late. Can't you ever be on time? So tired of waiting on you. So to change that and create margin in the situation, instead of fuming or getting all upset because they're late, you think of the things your spouse has to do, and you maybe have empathy for them.
I know it's just easy to kind of float through the week with like things coming at you from every direction, but I think it's really, really worth the effort to get a little more intentional about it and get on the same page so you can tackle it as a team. And so you can be on the same page and look together for, okay, we're busy here, but we've got a little time there, and let's make the best of that time. Let's make it quality. Margin is countercultural in a world that is bursting with busyness, but it's also very helpful for marriage. Margin can be created starting with our mindset. Learn some ways to do that today. I'm so excited to dive into this timely topic. It is so needed. But before we do, I want to remind you about our One Thing to Grow Your Marriage daily email from Dr. Kim. Every single weekday, you get this quick, simple email that tells you something you can do that day to be intentional about building your marriage. And they are great, actionable tips. You can sign up for that at awesomemarriage.com/one-thing. And when you do, we have an incredible bonus resource for you, which is our weekly marriage check-in. And this is an incredible way to build margin into your marriage. It helps you look at what you've got going on with your spouse, with your life that week. Make sure to check that out at awesomemarriage.com/one-thing. It's a free resource for you. So Dr. Kim, as we're starting off, let's begin by defining margin as it pertains to marriage.
Yeah, because I think most of us kind of think of margin, or I do, finances. I've heard Dave Ramsey talk about it forever. And in that, it's creating that bigger difference between your income and your outgoing. The bigger the number is, the better, and you get margin in your finances. So marriage, I think it's not just carving out more time for each other. It's how we use that time. It's creating margin in your marriage. It's not like it's a one-time event. You want that to become a lifestyle. You want to break negative cycles, patterns, and create that real quality time in your marriage that will make a difference. So it's making not only the time to do that in our busy lives, but also making sure it's really quality time that does connect us. And so it's going to make a difference. You know, if I've carved out an hour to be with Nancy, and I'm in the house with her, but we're not interacting or connecting, that's not going to probably create what I want that margin to create. What's going to create is if we connect, if we do something fun together, if we communicate or talk about something. And so that's an effective use of margin. Now, we do both, but you've got to make sure you have enough of that margin time that is for the two of you.
Yeah, that's so good. So I think that this is maybe easier said than done, because it's like you got to find the time, and then you got to make sure that you're not like so exhausted by the time you see each other. And so that's what I kind of want to get into as we go through this episode, because I know that it's not like you can go, and maybe you can, but it's like if you're feeling so busy, so overwhelmed, so burnt out, or whatever you are, you've got too many places to be, then maybe it's like baby steps. But I think we can draw some of those out today. I hope we can as we talk about this.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So, okay. So as we're in this Mind Your Marriage series, what does margin have to do with mindset? How are those connected?
Well, I think it's keeping your thoughts about your spouse and marriage positive. And we talked about gratefulness in another podcast. And I think it's giving a lot of grace to each other, because when I give grace to Nancy, that's going to create margin for us to connect and grow our marriage. And I think it's really just doing what you promised to do the day you stood at the altar and made this lifelong commitment to your spouse, of the things that you would do there and how you would love each other in sickness and health, all those kind of things that we said. I think is that mindset toward marriage of keeping it positive, and that this is this margin that we're creating gives us time to live that out and to connect more and to enjoy each other more.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up having grace for each other specifically, because I think that's a big part of what I think about when I think about margin is kind of giving each other a little more leeway. And so I was trying to think of examples of that. And one thing I thought of, and I would love to hear if you have any on top of your head too, but is like the kind of thing where you just don't make, don't major on the minors. So maybe if your spouse kind of has a tone that you don't like, instead of saying, why are you taking that tone? You just kind of go, maybe let it go. Maybe just let it go. Or maybe you say, are you good? Like, are you stressed? Because I'm feeling something coming off. Maybe you didn't mean to come
Yeah.
across that way, but rather than jumping on it, finding ways to give some leeway, some grace, some maybe some careful attention instead of making it into an issue. Do you have any other better examples?
Yeah, I think it makes me think of an example I've used before, but just an example, say your spouse is always late. And every
Mm-hmm.
time they're late, you respond with this negative comment. You're always late. Can't you ever be on time? I
Mm.
get so tired of waiting on you. So to change that and create margin in the situation, instead of fuming or getting all upset because they're late, you think of the things your spouse has to do, and you maybe
Mm.
have empathy for them, and you give
Mm-hmm.
them grace. And so instead of attacking them when they show up late, you greet them with a hug. You
Mm-hmm.
tell them how glad you are to see them.
Mm.
Instead of kind of acting pouty or whatever, you set aside their lateness and focus on enjoying the time you have together. Maintaining this positive attitude then creates
Mm-hmm.
margin, because if that was Nancy and I got in the habit of just, she was always late and I would just get on her first, and we're supposed to have lunch or dinner. Well, what's that going to do to lunch or dinner? It's going
Mm-hmm.
to put its negative over to start with. But
Yeah.
what if instead I go, hey, I'm glad to see you, and we go in and
Mm-hmm.
sit down, and she tells me about her day, and I think, of course she's late.
Mm-hmm.
She's, look at all she did today. And
Mm-hmm.
so just giving time for grace, giving each other the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Don't jump to the negative. And I think it goes back to what we talk about all the time, Lindsay, is that you're a team,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not. Do you want to chastise your teammate, the person
Mm-hmm.
that you've chosen to live life with? What's going to make your marriage better? Is it going to, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to awesome marriage, which is going to make your marriage better? Barking at your spouse or embracing them and showing them grace and loving them?
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
kind of answers itself.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It
It's just a
does.
no brainer.
Yeah.
But I think our tendency is to do the opposite a lot of times. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where the mindset comes in of, no, I cherish this person. I want
Mm-hmm.
our marriage to be as good as it can be. And I'm not gonna derail it by saying
Mm-hmm.
something that's just gonna not be very nice,
Mm-hmm.
or how's that gonna make her feel? Do I
Mm-hmm.
really want her to, she knows she's late. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's not like I'm giving her any new information, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
just that I want her to make sure she feels bad about being late. Well,
Mm-hmm.
what does that do? Nothing. Nothing good
Yeah.
for your marriage at all.
Yeah. No, it does not. You're right. So if you do have margin, what kind of impact is that going to make on the marriage?
Mm. I think it. I think it reduces stress. I think it
Mm.
reduces conflict, because you're just, because you're putting this positive thing into your marriage, into your relationship,
Mhm.
and so I think it. The things that we get upset about, or the things that we fight about, sometimes those just don't seem that important. We choose our battles a lot better, I think, when there's
Mhm.
margin. Um, and you create more time with each other, because to create that margin, you've learned to say no to things maybe that you said yes to before. So,
Mm.
yeah, how do you get that margin? You look at your schedule and
Yeah.
think, oh my gosh, it's so busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to say no to some things. And I
Mhm.
think then when you have margin, your marriage connects you more. You enjoy each other more.
Mhm.
Nancy and I were dating in college. We spent so much time together, and we didn't have
Mhm.
a lot of distractions. I mean, school, but
Yeah.
in college, you're not in school that many hours, and I didn't love studying at that time in my life, and so I had a lot of free time, and so, but I think that was helped grow our we put margin in a relationship. We
Mhm.
prioritized each other in our time together, and we would sit for hours and talk. We could sit over
Mhm.
dinner till they were run us out of the restaurant, because we were sitting there just talking. And it was
Mm-hmm.
so easy to do that in college. And I think sometimes in our early dating, all of us can do that. We're pursuing as guys, we're pursuing. And
Mm-hmm.
so you want to make sure that you continue to create that margin in your marriage. And at times we've done better than other, but we know the
Hmm.
value of it. And I think we've always seen when we get off track there, how important it is to get back on track as quick as we
Mm-hmm.
can.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happens without it? What happens when you're off track? What does that look like in your marriage or in marriage?
I think we drift apart. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Nancy's love language is quality time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I can fill that tank up one day, but then it's empty the next day. And so, we drift apart. We have less time for each other. I think for us, we can fight about things we wouldn't even fight about. We don't see each other as a team again. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you can get to where you just kind of exist together. So you're not creating that margin. And so your marriage is going to go kind of on two separate tracks instead of people working together to stay on the same track as a team. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really revealing too. Earlier, just a few minutes ago, you said if you have margin, you have less stress and less conflict. And I think a
Yeah.
marriage with more stress and more conflict, you just don't want that. And so that's what's going to happen without margin. Things that don't need to be conflict are going to become conflict. Things don't need to be stressful are going to become stressful.
Yeah, and we talk about your home being a refuge, your marriage being a
Mm-hmm.
refuge. And so you
Mm-hmm.
want to create that because you can't
Yeah.
control a lot of what happens when you walk out the door, drive out the
Mm-hmm.
driveway on a day, but you can control what happens when you guys are home together. You can
Yeah.
set aside that time to connect and spend with
Mm-hmm.
each other and talk about your days and ask each other to pray for each other. What can I pray for you about? All of
Mm-hmm.
those things that if you create the margin for those to happen, it's going to make your marriage better and your life better. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy that told me one time, he said, he was in a terrible job, but he needed it. He needed the money and he didn't have
Mm-hmm.
another option at that time. He said, I'd drive about 20 miles an hour to work. I take
Mm.
as long as I can to get there, and home I'm breaking the speed limit because
Yeah.
that's my
Yeah.
refuge. That's where I want to be. And I said, that's what we want,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And hopefully he got a job he loved too. But even with that,
Mm-hmm.
my home life, my time with Nancy should be the most important thing. And
Yeah.
you both work at it to make it that way, where you feel loved
Mm-hmm.
and cared for, and all your uniqueness.
I love that. That's so good. I think for anyone listening today, if you're listening thinking, I want my home to be a refuge and it's not even remotely a refuge right now, I think I just want to encourage you take this step to have a conversation with your spouse. How can we work together to start creating more margin in our
Mm-hmm.
marriage? How can we work together to give each other more grace? Please do not say, I need you to have margin for me and I need you to have grace for me. Don't come in and announce that, but come in and
Yeah.
say, hey, I really want this home to be a refuge. And right now it doesn't feel like it. What can we do together? How can we do this? And then your step is to do your part, not to do the job of telling your spouse their part.
Yeah, absolutely. Which we
Yeah.
can be really good at sometimes.
I know. It's unfortunate how good we can be at that, really.
And it makes so much sense to us. We just can't
I
understand
know.
why they don't just jump on it. Well, that's why God put us together
Yeah.
differently so that
Yeah.
we would learn from each other. Yeah, if it
Yeah.
was all my way, then Nancy could just be a AI robot. And
I think that
honestly,
might be an option now, Dr. Kim. That might
yeah, it
exist.
is, unfortunately.
That is so weird.
Yes.
So weird.
And yeah, but I don't want that. I want someone
No.
that challenges me and that
Yeah.
makes me kind of work at marriage too,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you
because
guys
I
have
know
done
our
such a
marriage
great
is better
job.
when we work on it.
You've done a great job cultivating that over years. It's not like you just like started out this way. You've
Oh,
worked for
no.
this for ages and it's really now you're enjoying the fruit of that.
We do. And,
Mm-hmm.
we're not perfect by any means.
Mm-hmm.
We can still get upset with each other or whatever. The other
Mm-hmm.
day, what was it? Nancy and I would we hadn't really been arguing. We didn't, but something we were talking about pretty seriously. And so I walked in the restroom and I hit my hand on the deal
Oh.
and I started going, ugh, like that and stuff. And she goes, okay, come back here and tell me what you're mad about. And I said, well, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad because I hit my hand and it hurts. And she goes, oh, okay. So.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. That's so funny. It's so real. So let's talk about how to take some practical steps to create margin. I think as we're talking about this conversation, Dr. Kim, where I am in life, I'm thinking about all my friends we've got all these kids, we've got all these kids activities. Everyone's going from work to
Hmm.
sports to homework to dinner. And it's just, how do you even start to create margin? What are the practical steps?
I do think it starts, as we've talked about this whole thing, in our minds, renewing our
Mm,
mind, praying for God to help you see your spouse through God's eyes. And I think that ups their value in our eyes. And
mm-hmm,
so I think the motivation there is then to create that margin as you really see,
mm-hmm,
oh my gosh, this is somebody God's given me. I really do want to create margin. I want to spend more
mm-hmm,
time and I want to be quality time. I think this is really hard, the stage that you and so many people are in is our schedules, learning how to, can you say no to some things? Are there some
mm-hmm,
things that you can create that margin just in your schedule so you have that intentional time for
mm-hmm,
the two of you? And I think you have to be real, maybe, like our weekly checkup we have to sit down and say, okay, when are we carving out time for us this week?
mm-hmm,
When's our date night? When is
mm-hmm,
this? And making sure that those are things that you hold sacred, that they don't get bumped off the
mm-hmm,
calendar. Um, and so I think that's, Nancy. I've put Nancy's on my calendar every night at 6:30 when I get home, from 6:30 to 7, and that's because I don't need it on the calendar because we've been doing that for a long time.
mm-hmm.
But I want to make sure that somebody didn't put something else on my calendar, or I don't put
Yeah.
something else on my calendar at that time.
Yep.
Our date night is on the calendar every week. It just goes week to week to week to week. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's like, okay, if something changes that, it's going to be, we both change it together and we figure
Mm-hmm.
out a different time for our date night.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just kind of putting those things on your calendar makes a difference, because I found when it's on my calendar, I I don't change things that are on my calendar. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's not on my calendar, then it's easy to put something in that spot. Well, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is the time I have for Nancy, but she'll be okay. I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is really being really intentional with your the way your calendar looks with your time. I
Mm-hmm.
think budget, setting aside money for dates and trips and things like that. Don't go
Mm-hmm.
into debt, but have that time there so we get some margin for, and you have your date night, or you've created a spot in your budget for a trip, and
Mm-hmm.
then you can, because I think those are one of the best ways to create margin. It's just getting
Mm-hmm.
away, the two of you,
Yes.
to be somewhere where you're just together, and
Mm-hmm.
you spend time together, and you kind of rekindle that relationship and why you're married in the first place. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think those are all things that I think of that are some practical steps that for me really do make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good. Those are really good. I love that you mentioned the weekly checkup, because that is just such a helpful thing for, like a busy season of life, or a season where things might pop onto the calendar with
Yeah.
maybe not both spouses knowing about it. So I think having that time to check in and say, hey, here's what we've got going on. Let's make sure we're on the same page. I know it's just easy to kind of float through the week with like things coming at you from every direction. But I think it's really, really worth the effort to get a little more intentional about it and get on the same page, so you can tackle it as a team. And so you can be on the same page and look together for, okay, we're busy here, but we've got a little time there, and let's make the best of that time. Let's make it quality.
Yeah, and knowing it's a season. you
Mm-hmm.
know Things will
Mm-hmm.
be better. The kids aren't going to need a driver all the time.
Right.
Your oldest will be driving sometime, and they love driving, and so
Mm-hmm.
they take the others. They can run some of the
Yes.
errands for you. They can do some of the things
Yes.
like that for you. And so, yeah, just how do we adjust? And I think it's so important as a couple. Okay, this is a different season than when we were
Mm-hmm.
in a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
How do we make it happen now? And then
Mm-hmm.
when this season, get that driver, okay, we've got a little more margin now. What are we going
Yeah.
to do with that? Just
Yep.
continuing to adjust to it in the
Mm-hmm.
different seasons while your kids are at home, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good, because you're right. The seasonality is really important to recognize, because it's going to change so quickly, and then
Yes,
you'll have to
it does.
readjust all over again. And that's part of it. That's part of, I think, why this process is so helpful, is because you can take it into all the seasons. Once you start getting used to looking
Absolutely.
together at this and working together, just get that, you know, blame, stress, conflict piece out of it so that you can work together to realize really the hopes you had for your marriage together, the hopes you had for your family, what you
Hmm.
want to see happen in the home together. I think that's going to get you a lot farther.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. So, oh, did you have something else on that?
No.
Okay, I didn't want to cut.
Um,
Want to hear it all. So, what are some ways that you and Nancy have done this over your marriage?
Yeah, I was thinking back at things. I think for me, one of the early things was learning to say no when I realized, I was gone most nights. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, this just isn't working. It's not working as a dad. It wasn't working as a husband because if I was gone that night, I was double tired of what I'd been if I'd come home at the regular time. So I
Mm.
think that was really important, learning to say no
Mm-hmm.
and not feel bad about it just
Mm-hmm.
because I'm choosing. I would feel guilty about saying no to someone. And I think once I realized when I say yes to them, I'm saying no to Nancy. And that
Mm-hmm.
helped me a lot. Okay, who do I
Mm-hmm.
really not want to say no to? Well, it's her. And
Mm-hmm.
so it helped me in that. I think listening to each other, learning to really listen makes a
Mm-hmm.
big difference because, as I see that in counseling all the time, I don't have anything magical at all as a
Mm-hmm.
counselor, but so many times people have never had anybody listen to them, really
Mm-hmm.
listen to them. And there's so much value in that, to feel
Mm-hmm.
heard and to know that your spouse cares enough to listen and they're not watching their watch and they're not thinking, okay, the game starts in 10 minutes. Can you speed this up a little bit? No, that you really listen to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think not making assumptions is huge. When you
Mm-hmm.
assume something about your spouse, to check it out, make sure uh, that you're right or not
Mm-hmm.
on that. And same thing with expectations. Um, what if I get an expectation of Nancy? You know, do I? And I haven't shared with that, and she doesn't do it. Well, why? I
Mm-hmm.
can't get mad at her. So, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to do this. Can you do it? Yes. Great. No. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll. That's not my expectation anymore. Giving each other the benefit of the doubt, grace, I
Mm-hmm.
think is probably what we're talking about there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think one thing that really helped us is when we realized we were not each other's enemy. It
Mm-hmm.
was almost like our fights would be like we were enemies. And to
Mm-hmm.
realize, no, we're on the same team. We're each other's advocate. We want to stand together and fight, not fight each other. I think
Mm-hmm.
those have helped us create margin. And I think they've helped us reframe each other in our marriage in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've made a huge difference.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I mean, that's a huge mental shift, is just to really look at your spouse and go, you're not the enemy, you're the teammate. We're
Yeah.
we're trying to work together to solve whatever it is, not to try to
Right.
gain the victory over each other. That makes no sense.
And the Bible tells us two are better than one. So when you're
Yeah.
together solving it, yeah, you're going to go a long way, especially when you're fighting things that the enemy throws at you,
Yeah. Yes.
for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's hard too, because it's like sometimes things just come at you so fast. You've got these decisions to make, you've got to figure things out. You've been thinking about it before the conversation came up. So you've probably got a way already kind of on the back of your mind about how to make it happen. And then you tell them and they don't immediately agree. So it's like, oh, this whole big
Yeah.
thing. But you're just not going to solve it if you're trying to always defend and convince and, make it into a you versus me thing. That just doesn't work.
Yeah. Anytime it's a win lose thing, your marriage loses. I see that
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. Your marriage has got to win. And if it
Mm-hmm.
wins, then you both win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we want to look first for, that mental shift into margin. Some ways that we have done this in our marriages, we've just said no to a lot of things. Like
Yeah.
we've, one thing I realized a few years back is that there are a lot of commitments you make, or a lot of opportunities you might be invited into, where the time commitment is not very clear. At this point, I will do my very best to find out exactly what the time commitment is before committing, because there are some surprises that I'm just not okay with. When you sign up for the
Yeah.
2 hour slot, but then it turns into 5 hours. No, we can't do that. We can't do that. When
Yeah.
you sign up for the Thursday night practice, but then, oh, it's also Sunday morning games. Nope, can't do that. So finding out what it is you're committing to ahead of time, and then just being really intentional about sticking with, what works and what doesn't, and feeling okay about letting those things go by.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so good.
That's been huge for us, and it's made us kind of weirdos. Like our kids already knew ahead of time. Mom and dad probably aren't going to do it. I'm like, absolutely, we're not doing that. We just can't do all those things.
Yeah, and I think kids accept that,
Yeah.
especially when you've kind of had that mindset. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I've had kids tell me that the parents say yes to everything for them, and they're
Mm-hmm.
they're saying, "I just don't want to play baseball this spring. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
do this. I want some time just to be a boy. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
go outside and play with my friends." And so sometimes, uh, maybe we think we're doing things for our kids, and maybe we're not always doing the best thing for them either. Talk to them about that. But
Mm-hmm.
learning to say no to things, I think, is so important as a family too. And
Mm-hmm.
what are your standards? When
Yeah.
my kids were growing up, there were no games or practices on Wednesday nights or Sunday, at least till the afternoon. And
Mm-hmm.
we've gotten away from that
Oh
in
yeah,
in so
big
many
time.
ways. And so, what does that do to your family? And it always reminds me of the stance that Chick-fil-A took, and
Mm-hmm.
being closed on Sunday. And I heard something last week, and I'll get it a little bit wrong, but I think it said that Chick-fil-A's per store income is higher than
Mm.
McDonald's, Wendy's, and I think Taco Bell's combined per store
Wow.
income. And they're
Mm-hmm.
closed one day a week. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, God honors things.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he does. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a good example. I'm not saying if you don't do something on Sunday, you're going to get, thousand
Right.
dollars or something next week. But I mean, I
Yeah.
think that all goes into it too. What do you really want
Mm-hmm.
for your marriage, and what do you want for your family? And to
Mm-hmm.
create that, you're going to have to say no to some things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a great point, Dr. Kim. It reminded me of there's a study. I read the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. He's a pastor. And,
Mm-hmm.
and he cites some studies in that book about groups of people and cultures that do specifically practice a Sabbath, which is one day of rest and worship a week. And populations that do practice that really diligently actually live longer. And so it's fascinating because you're saying God honors that, and I believe He does, and I also think that it's designed into us. It's like we're designed to need rest every night, food every few hours. All these things we're designed for. It's like if we're trying
Yeah.
to work around that design, we're actually not functioning as well anymore. We're
No.
not made for that. And so I think it's really beautiful to start thinking about, okay, what do we want for our family? And I know one thing we've done is we've said in different seasons, it changes, from season to season, but we've said, how do we
Sure.
want our week to go? How many nights a week minimum do we want to have at home just to feel like human beings in a family? How many commitments in a week can we
Yeah.
feasibly handle? How can we build in a family Sabbath rhythm where we have a day off during the week where we are enjoying life and enjoying being together, and then build up from there, instead of just letting everything kind of flood in and doing whatever we can.
Absolutely. And I think our culture in the United States is so counter that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to fall into that. It reminded me of when Nancy and I were in Italy in 2000, and that's been a while. And so things may have changed, but we had two restaurants that we really wanted to go to. I think one maybe was in Rome. So we get there, and the sign on the door says, "We're closed. We're on holiday." They closed their restaurants for 2 weeks. I can't imagine any restaurant in the United States thinking it could close for 2 weeks and people would be back. And it just made me think, yeah, they know it's important.
Yeah.
They're giving themselves and their employees time off to be together. I don't know how the people used it, but boy, you got an opportunity for some real margin when those kind of
Yeah.
things. And so I say that just because I think we have to fight it harder in our culture to
Mm-hmm.
do that and be okay with being countercultural if
Mm-hmm.
that's what's best for your family and for your marriage.
Absolutely. And the reality is, when we do that, then someone else can see that and go, oh, they did it. I can do it too.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If
Yeah.
nobody signed up for teams that played on Sunday morning,
Right.
then they wouldn't be playing on Sunday morning
It's like
anymore.
a
And I'm not
pastor's
dishing any
dream
of that.
right
Whatever you
now.
decide to do as a family, and I know that we go to church on Saturday afternoon. So I mean, I
Hmm.
know people do different things like that.
Hmm.
But what you're saying about the Sabbath is so important, and I
Hmm.
think there's so much that research now to show us the value of that, which is, it doesn't validate the Bible. God knew it, what we
Hmm.
needed. It just shows that
Yes.
God knows us better than we know ourselves. And so I think
Yeah.
research
Yeah.
is proving that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that
So
stuff.
it's
It's so
good.
fascinating. That's so good. And
Yeah.
so I would encourage anyone who feels like, because I know if you are really busy, slowing down can be so scary because what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? What are the kids going to do? And I think just be encouraged. You'll figure it out, and it's okay. It's okay to be a little bored. It's okay to have a growth curve there, because I know stopping just can be terrifying if you haven't done it, or slowing down. But I do also think that God will honor that, and He has made you for rhythms that have room for you to be a human person, not just a human doer.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was going through people in my mind that I've counseled with that have chosen to do that. I can't think of any of them that regretted the decision. And
Mm-hmm.
even though they got pushback from all kinds of places when they
Mm-hmm.
made some of those decisions, I think they would all say, if we could get them here now, that, oh my gosh, that was a great decision for our family. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. It was hard for those
Mm-hmm.
couples. You're saying it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
but what do you got to lose?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and what you have to gain can be so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't want, okay, no emails about, but my kid's going to play in the major league, so he's got to play in this league on Sundays. Okay, fine. And, send me a ticket when he
Yeah, yeah,
gets to, especially if he plays for the Yankees, because I'd love to come and see him.
yeah.
But, I mean, I think, I'm not saying, no, I'm just saying, think about it. Just
Mm-hmm.
consider these things
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
decide together what your marriage is going to look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying, don't let somebody else make the decisions for you. If you
Oh,
choose to make those decisions, fine, make them. But don't let somebody else make the decisions for you.
yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's just so easy to get swept along, pressured,
Mm-hmm.
like guilted, all this kind of stuff. Get FOMO, keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We
Yes.
get to make the decision. Yeah. So let's talk about how we can do this during the holiday season. Christmas is coming, things get busier. How can we still have margin?
Yeah, because I think this is a season we always think, oh, we have so much to do. I hear that so
Hmm.
many times. How am I getting everything done? So I think it's a great time to think about it. I think
Hmm.
what we did about putting things on your calendar, the time for just the two of you or your family, those kind of things, hold those sacred, create traditions that you
Hmm.
just have that everything else takes a back seat too. Maybe that's what you do when you decorate the Christmas tree as a family or as a couple. It's maybe music that you all listen to together. It's going on. We used to love to get all the kids in the car and go look at Christmas lights. And,
Hmm.
Nancy would make hot chocolate and would be looking at lights, and we'd have Christmas music playing in the car, and, creating some of those things that were just us.
Hmm.
And then I think when we get in, and I think learning to, again, like you've talked about, Lindsay, what can you say no to? What are the
Hmm.
things, and maybe it's taking time to sit down and say, okay, what are the things that really are important to us to have at
Hmm.
Christmas? Our family
Hmm.
Christmas dinner is really important.
Hmm.
Everybody, it's a great time for us. We definitely want to make sure we have that. Different things like that, and then you kind of got a guideline of what to say no to, and you don't have to say yes to everything or every
Hmm.
invitation or things like that. And I think the other thing that Nancy I've learned to do is to ask each other every day, how can I help you?
Hmm.
And that just most of the time, Nancy says, I'm fine,
Hmm.
but she knows that I'm there to help her if she isn't. And so, like, if you're having family over for a meal during the holidays and your spouse decides she's going to do the cooking, you're not going to go pick something up, then how can I help you? Okay,
Hmm.
yeah, I know I messed up everything I cooked last year. So can I just wash the dishes for you? Or can I sweep the kitchen and mop the kitchen after you get through? Whatever it is. And so really just kind of look that you can create, when I said that, that kind of creates margin, even though you're doing something, she's cooking dinner, but you're there together. We love to cook together. And I would say that's a margin thing for us because we love doing it and we have fun with it. And, sometimes we'll throw flour on each other, or something or whatever. I've always wanted to take that sprayer, but I've never had the guts to do it. I probably never will do that. But I just saw that in a movie once. I thought that looked so funny, but I'm not sure that'd go over that well in our home. So anyway. But yeah, I think it's a great time to do that so that you're just not exhausted by the time Christmas is over, that you enjoy the things that you've created margin to enjoy and then do it.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. And then it's going to be a season you really enjoy and that doesn't just exhaust you.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been a really helpful, practical, and encouraging conversation. What is a final piece of advice you'd like to leave us with today, Dr. Kim?
I would love and Nancy and I have to continue to do this every once in a while, and that is to look at, okay, where's our time for each other? Where's the margin in our marriage? What do we want that to look like now? I think the weekly checkup's a great way to do this, especially if you've got kids and busyness. But look at creating margin, and not only the time, how are you going to use that time? That's equally, if not more important than creating the time. You got to create the time, sure. But then what are you going to do with it? And how's that going to grow your marriage? And I think if you get in the habit of doing it, you're going to see the rewards of doing that, of creating that margin, enjoying each other, and you're just going to probably want more and more margin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. That's so good. That's so good. Well, I hope that this conversation has helped you think through the topic of creating margin in marriage and how you can start to do that today. Later this week, we are delighted that we get to bring you a bonus podcast episode with Kristen Hatton, author of Parenting Ahead, to talk about parenting without fear of the teen years. Is it possible? I think it is. So make sure you tune in for that and share it with the parents of kids, tweens, and teens in your life. Thanks again for joining us today. Thanks. Oops. I just got all glitched out.
You're so grateful.
I'm so grateful. Have a great day and do something awesome for your marriage today.